Hi everyone, I'm Tara and I'm going to teach you how to make sculpture paper today. This is our first class for the mixed media group on Smeared and Smudged, and it's pretty easy. Sculpture paper, if you look it up online, it's not something that's new. You could probably find a couple of tutorials online about it. This is just the way that I do it and that I found that it's the easiest to do. So if you've been to my blog before, you've probably seen this card, which is one of my favorite ones that I made with sculpture paper. And you can see the whole outline is covered with it. The whole outside, I should say, is covered with it. And it just gives this really neat texture to it. It's really fun to use, and it's fun to make, really easy. So if you come over here, I will show you how to do it. The supplies that you're going to need for this are some gesso. I like to use white and black depending on what project I'm making it for, and this is the kind that I use. You're going to need some paint to go over the gesso, and for today I'm just going to use white, but you can use any color combinations that you want to. This is just so you can see what I'm doing. You're going to need some paper towels, and when you're buying paper towels you want to make sure that you look at the pattern that's on the paper towel, because whatever ridges are on there are going to show up in your end piece. Like you can see, the kind that I usually buy has this kind of scaly, scallopy kind of pattern on it, and you can see that in my card. You can kind of see the little bumps and scales. So you want to make sure that whatever paper towel you're buying has that kind of texture that you want on it, and you definitely want to get white paper towels unless you're going to cover it over with paint, just to make sure that nothing shows through. And then you're going to need some foil, and you will need paintbrush, and then just a scrap little thing to hold your paint. So I'm going to start off first by taking some gesso, and I'm just going to drop it all over my foil. And I'm going to spread this out all over the bottom of the foil. You want to kind of, you don't have to go all the way to the edge, but you want to make sure that you cover a portion of the foil that's larger than the piece of paper towel that you're using, because you want it to come out over the edge of where the paper towel is laying. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to be covered up. So let me just make sure. You can see that I cut my paper towel in half, just so I can do some different colors and stuff. So I'm going to lay that on there, and that's perfect. You can see it comes out past the edge, and you're going to need that to hold the paper towel to the foil. And then I'm just going to put some more gesso down, and I'm going to take and I'm going to cover and smush my paper towel into the foil. Like I said, this is really easy to do. What's going to take the most time is drying time, because you have to let it dry completely in between your steps. And this is one of those that you can't really use a heat gun on. I like to use a heat gun on everything because I'm really impatient. I don't like to sit and wait for it to dry. But on this one you kind of have to, because you don't really want it to bubble up or anything like that. Unless that's the look you're going for. I've actually never done it, so it might be fun to try one day. I'm going to add a little bit more gesso on there, just enough to get it covered. And once again, you're going to want to go over the edges, just to kind of seal that paper towel in there. And it doesn't have to be super perfect, because you want texture in it. So you can see, I don't know if you can see on the video, but I have some ridges in there. It's not perfectly flat, but that's okay, because, well, you'll see in a minute that that's okay. So this is what the paper looks like once you're done painting it with your gesso, and you want to let this dry completely. And the reason I'm using black is so that you can see what I'm doing, that I covered the paper towel, but you could also use white. Or you could use clear, which I've actually never done before. But I think that'd be kind of neat, maybe to let some of the color show through after you paint it. So I'll set that aside. I already have some that I had sitting and that are dry. So here's my white that you can see is covered, and here's my black. And I'm going to go ahead and work on the black so you can see what I'm doing to it. But the technique works for both, either or, whichever color gesso. You could even probably tint your gesso before you use it if you want to have a background color. Or on the white, after this step, you could add a color of paint and just paint over it and let that dry also. But for this one, I'm just going to leave the background black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to crumble up my foil and reopen it. And at this point, the paper towel should be sticking to your foil. That's why we went over the edges with the gesso, because you don't really want it to come up too much. It may come up a little bit, but so you're just going to keep crumbling and opening until you get the texture that you want on there. And it's up to you whether you want a lot of bumps and ridges or a little bit. I like a lot, so I'm going to sit here and crumble this a lot. And when you finally get it to look the way you want, you kind of flatten it out a little bit. You don't want to flatten it too much, because what we're going to do is we're going to add paint over to the top of it. So now I'm just going to take some acrylic paint. This is just like craft paint, which is what I use for this kind of stuff. You don't really need to buy expensive paint for this, unless you're going to be using it on, you know, an art piece or something like that. But so I'm going to take that paint, and what I'm going to do is put some on my brush, and then I'm going to kind of dry brush over the top of this, because I only want to get the paint onto the mountains, you know, the pieces that are sticking up. And you want to leave the portion that's inside, or I guess it's at the very back of the paper. You want to leave that kind of dark so that you can tell that there's some texture on there. So I'm just going to go around very lightly with kind of a dry brush and add the coloring onto the top of this. You can see that it's barely touching the portions that are raised up. And you can always come back in later and add more if you want to. So I would say put a little bit down first and then come back in and add more later. And you can still go into the little valleys if you want to a little bit. And then once you get this completed, you're going to let that dry. You can use whatever color you want on this. I'm using white so you can see what I'm doing. There's a brush here. But like I said, you can use whatever color. You can tint your gesso first, or you can paint over it and let it dry before you fold it up, crumble it up. Then you can add whatever color. So pretty much any color combination that you'd like to use in your project. And then just come back in and keep adding until you think it's done, until it has the look that you want. And you want to keep your brush pretty dry, like I said, because it's easier to add more than it is to take it off. Like right here I kind of globbed it a little bit, but that's okay. So I think I've just about got it how I want it. And that's it. So I'm gonna let that dry. And I want you guys over the next couple of days just to try some different combinations of the sculpture paper, some different colors, try and figure out you know, how you like it, what colors you like using, and just come up with a couple of samples that you can use in some projects. And over the next couple of days, I'm going to do some projects and show you how to use this paper. Really easy. You leave it on the foil and use it, so you don't have to remove it or anything like that. When you leave it on the foil, it keeps the texture behind the paper towel, and it's really neat, a really neat effect. So, so yeah, so go ahead and try it. Make some couple little sheets that you want to work with, and then I'll come back during the week with 1 or 2 projects for you to try it on. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks a lot.